we have a little bit of time. We're starting the next session and I guess about 12 minutes. That will go for an hour, then we have a break. Chance for people to get up and stretch a little bit and come back, or maybe do a couple other things that they need to take care of. But I would like to hear from a few of the groups. What did you talk about? What should this group know about? What should we share with one another? You know, at least within our group, we talked a lot about identity. We talked about the college experience. We talked about what the differences are across different institutions to some extent, but across different countries in particular. But let's hear from others. And I see something. Great, so we are back. Is there someone who would be willing to share?
I'll think. I'm just John Abley, and I'm here through I'm started something called the Argosy Foundation. We work in this area, among other things. But I've been involved with Rick Miller since Olin started, because I've been passionate about the need for Olin as a disruptor, a laboratory, if you will, where everybody can see that exploration going on to address whether it's 21st century skills, but at the very least, the whole concept of character on top of whatever else is you're studying. And unfortunately, the polarization that's going on around the world is undoing character as a product. And it is very interesting to listen to Jonathan this morning talk about the university church. My wife is a interfaith minister. And as it turns out, that's a very difficult thing to do, particularly in these days. What is a congregation? Think about that. And you'd like to think just the friends we make here, what is that commonality? And what is character across those different, whatever it is we're doing? And what does that mean for addressing some of the challenging issues that we have to deal with as a society? And higher ed is not doing a good job from a PR point of view, certainly. But I also think from a practical point of view, as I look at graduates of a lot of these schools, I'm sort of disappointed that the concept of what being a good citizen is and so forth, I think was stronger, 50 years ago than it is today. And citizenship is, to me, kind of something that you probably need to have if you're going to solve difficult problems that we have to do.
Yeah, thank you, John. That's tremendous. Character comes up a lot within the coalition. That may not be a surprise, because that certainly feeds into the things that we're talking about, the identity, agency, and purpose of students, and how do we build character, and what does building character mean, and what's the right character? Having strong citizens, how do you create them? What does that mean? What elements of their education are necessary to make that happen? That's tremendous. But we have some time. Let's hear from others. I'm sure we have others who would like to say a few words. Stu Thompson has a raised hand. Please go ahead.
Hi, Keith. Hi from down the hall. So we talked a little bit about COVID and its impact on students and how we can kind of begin to evaluate what's happening to them. And, are we seeing similar trends among just the small number of folks we had in the room? But I could feel there was definitely a lot of empathy there, and just trying to really help them deal with this ridiculously challenging time. The first years who are coming into it, and the sophomores who have been a part of it, and looking at some differences there. But everybody's having like the same problem. So I mean, it was not good to hear about it, but I think it's good to hear that at least the problems are consistent. And as an engineer, if you've got consistent problems, you can begin to address those, although the solutions may not necessarily be consistent. But it was nice to kind of share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Stu. That's a great comment. I didn't mention COVID before, but actually I had it in my notes, and had overlooked it because it is such a big part of our current students' lives. And certainly for us in the coalition, and Rick and I have told this story a number of times, of in starting the coalition just before the pandemic really started to affect people's lives, we really wondered whether the work of the coalition could go forward. Can we make this happen? Can we bring people together? Are they just plain overwhelmed? Are students just plain overwhelmed? Is there any way to get engagement? What we found is that people were still very engaged. In fact, from students and faculty and staff's points of view, the pandemic made it clear that we need to do more, that we definitely, the time for these discussions is opportunistically perhaps now because of COVID. COVID has raised the bar on what we are all trying to achieve. And it's really made the idea of well-being and the challenges that students face in trying to develop well-being are just so overwhelming to many of our students and to many of us. So thank you for bringing that up. So that's a great point. And we could talk a long time about how that's impacted different campuses and how that impacts our work. Others, we have a few more minutes, 6 minutes.
Should I just unmute and speak?
Go for it. Go for it.
Well, the thing I would say, we, in our group, one of the things that we reflected on is our gratitude for having Reverend Walton, his message be centered in this space, and really to have him open up our minds to think, it wasn't just sort of a traditional sort of here's a bunch of data and take it in. It was really very provocative, his reflections, and they were honoring to people of many different experiences, including those who had bad experiences in the church. So we were really appreciative of his sensitivity and a thought that took us in a different direction what we anticipated.
Yeah, thank you very much. I definitely agree. I think that conversation, particularly as we think about character and providing opportunity for our students, what role does the religious traditions that many of us have experienced and still practice, or maybe have thought more about, and maybe changed our minds about certain things? How does that all fit together? A tremendously provocative conversation and talk by Jonathan. I thought that was tremendous. Lynn, you have your hand raised.
Thanks, Keith, and thanks, Linda, who is in my group. So that's very much the kind of beginning and middle of our conversation. And I was left with kind of the end of our conversation in our small group. Dean Walton had mentioned kind of the performance behind the pulpit versus behind the podium, and kind of that theatrical kind of knowing what goes into all of that. But the notion of performance was kind of echoed in our conversation in the small group, and the role of faculty as whole people, and as central to this whole endeavor of well-being for our students. But our faculty are the ones that are really doing this work. And yet, they as whole people are also within this system trying to survive by the metrics, by evaluation, and so forth. And we can see this, and yet we perpetuate this system as we exist in it. And so we were kind of left with this tension of being in a system, needing to perform for the system, and yet wanting to change it.
Yeah, that's a great comment, and that's one that we could discuss at great length, I think, and hopefully we'll have some more opportunities to do that. As I was listening to you talk about performance, I think there's lots of different ways to think about that. When you think about the performance behind the pulpit, as faculty, we perform every day pretty much. And I think some of us look at that fourth wall of theater and try to break down that fourth wall and engage our students beyond just being a faculty member and trying to educate them about whatever topic we're talking about. We want to meet them. We want to be with them. But there is that great tension with the way in which we reward what faculty do and how they spend their time. And I see Rick's hand up, and I want to make sure I give him time to say a few words. Go ahead, Rick. And I think you were muted at the moment, Rick.
Yeah, sorry. I just was struck by his authenticity, his transparency, the example that he brought of how education played a key role in developing his own identity, his own sense of agency, and his own sense of purpose. It clearly transformed his life. Also, the example that he gave of dealing with what are some of the most controversial topics that we have on campus today, where there are sharp differences of views, a cancel culture that is toxic. And I would say his approach illustrated 3 principles, which I found to be prerequisites to making progress on these conversations. Number 1, avoid judgment. Number 2, avoid condescension. And number 3, avoid self-righteousness. If you're going to bring people together and honor their position, any starting point which avoids those 3 principles, I've seen not get off the launch pad. It's great for the community that already agrees with you, but it doesn't do a lot to bring in new voices. So I was very excited by what he brought to the table.